Thanks, Chair, and thanks to our guests. And I would have met you before in my role as Sinn Féin spokesperson for older people, and I'd like to say thank you for being here. I'm just going to briefly ask you a few questions, and I'm following on from Senator Conway, where he asked about the loneliness and that. And I suppose I'm concerned, is it pre-COVID there as well, or is it mostly since COVID? And also around the mental health of our older people, what are the demographics? Are they mostly male or female that are suffering most with mental health? If you don't mind giving me an insight into that, please.
On the general statement around loneliness, I think we've given people the language to actually to state. So I think the levels of loneliness were always there. I think the pandemic obviously exacerbated the situation. But then on top of that is a bit like mental health in younger people. You know, it's all right not to be okay. We've actually given people, or part of what we've been trying to do is destigmatise loneliness, give people the language with the ability and the strength to reach out, and that ultimately to realise that, and for everybody to realise, ending up loneliness is not a personal failure. It's the fracture sometimes of life. You retire, maybe you lose a spouse or a partner, maybe your health is poor. Over 80s sometimes you can spend up to 80 to 90% of their time in their own home. So as people age, they sometimes lose social groups, and then the family size has changed. So really what we've been trying to do is destigmatise it. We think some of the loneliness was always there, but now hopefully we're giving people the language to actually deal with it, and the empirical evidence and the research is really coming through of how dangerous it is to people, young and old, because the Loneliness Task Force also provides. And
can I ask you then, for our older generation, what are the waiting lists like then for them around their mental health? So if they need to see psychiatrists or anything, are they left for long periods of time waiting, or what way is that for you? Do you have any statistics on that?
I'll check if we have any stats here, but what I would say is that the reality is you know, even if you take something simple, right, I don't think there's an NGO for the mental health of older people compared to, you know, in other things. And I think it's probably because a generation grew up, and I might be getting close to that myself, where in schools and all that, you didn't get that education around minding your mental health, and you didn't understand, and the language and the services never really fully developed. So in some ways, for us, you know what I mean?
So would we be looking for the Department of Health then to progress in advertising more needs for people with mental health issues that are elderly?
Yeah, I think the reason we do our ECC reports, our stat reports, is because it gives people a sense of what's coming through in emergent needs. So if you look at the first quarter of this year, you know, of those that we assessed, 25% of people who were assessed figured, you know, were struggling with mental health issues, whether it was anxiety, depression, loneliness, or obviously dementia or Alzheimer's. So it's a big cohort of the people on the ground who are struggling with these things, that again, there may not have been services developed, there may not have been an understanding of that this is something that affects old ages equally with young age.
No problem, thank you. And can I ask what effect the recruitment embargo is having on older people, if you have any statistics on that?
We don't have specific statistics on it, but the recruitment embargo, anecdotally, we found has really impacted across the board, whether it's in terms of home support, whether it's really staff across the HSE in general. In relation to mental health also, what we found is that older people are waiting for quite a long time to access things like counselling in their local communities. A Mental Health Commission report 2020, I believe it was, looked at the mental health services and supports for older people. We would have cited that report. We met with the Joint Oireachtas Subcommittee on Mental Health last year, and there was quite it was quite, I would say, a damning report into mental health services for older people, the lack of acute beds, the need for further action, and there's quite a wide range of evidence in that area. The research that was carried out by Aware this week and supported by Alone, we found there was slightly higher level of mental health difficulties among older women, but that there what we find sometimes with data like that is that sometimes older men are less willing to talk about the difficulties they're experiencing. So there might be a range of things that impact that.
When you talk about a range of things that impact that, would the cost of living and financial, particularly if they're on set, like your social welfare, your pension and all that, is that having an impact, do you think, on their mental health as well?
What we found, and we're waiting for the results of our pre-budget survey from this year, but last year we did a survey with the older people we work with on the cost of living and the impact that was having on their lives. And a lot of the feedback from that was that being unable to afford to, say, go out for a social outing was having a significant impact. But as well as that, being unable to afford perhaps to keep your heating on, to pay your bills, that obviously increases your levels of stress and anxiety, and that is all having an impact on a lot of the older people that we work with.
Okay, and just going back to your approved housing body, and you said that they had 140 and you have planning permission gone in for another 40. Are they rural or urban?
Most of them, they would be in Dublin. They would be in Dublin, whereas we're across every community in Ireland. The reality is the housing is in Dublin. For us, the future is housing with on-site support. So we're moving away probably from that type of current housing, trying to introduce the new, fill the emerging need and the gap that's filled in other countries. So we would see some of that stock will change over time. And
would you have many rural houses?
No, we don't at the moment, but we will be looking to try and create. We're part of the Pathfinder to try and find a way that the government can and the departments can get urban and rural examples of on-site support to create a new housing choice for older people rather than just nursing homes, and keep them in the community.
So moving on from that, the fact that you don't have many houses of your own then in rural Ireland, what way are you finding local authorities in housing adaptation? Is it very slow, or is there a long waiting list, or what's happening there?
I think we did freedom of information requests to all local authorities just before Christmas last year, and we found roughly around, some people don't keep waiting lists, so the numbers are not fully accurate. Do you know what I mean? Not everybody keeps numbers, and then people keep them in different ways. But there's around 3,500 people waiting. The system is slow, it's cumbersome. We've done a lot of work again with other NGOs where we produce reports going back to 2017, trying to help streamline it, reduce the one assessment form. But the reality is we all know the building inflation the last few years, everything else is, any increase has just been swallowed up. We're really at 2011 figures, but the demand for that grant is so much higher just by the nature of things. I think the most important thing, I think the system is really designed, it's also worried that people might benefit, or their house price or something would be augmented, or somebody else would do well. But that's why we point out in one of the quarters last year, 50% of all the people we were helping with grants were for bathrooms. Do you know what I mean? And by the way, a disability bathroom will devalue your house, because after a probate sale, the chances are somebody's going to have to pay to take it out. Do you know what I mean?
Just finish in conclusion, because I'm conscious of the clock, so I thank you for that, Sean. I've been made aware of some carers that are going in where there would be significant amount of carers going into care for one specific person. So there would be a rotation maybe of 3 or 4 carers going in a week. I have an issue around that, particularly where there would be people with dementia or Alzheimer's, where the structure is changing and they're not familiar with the people that are going in. Are you coming across that? And finally, can I just briefly ask about your fundraising as well? That's it. Thank you.
Sure.
In relation to home care, I might take that one. So there's generally changes in care throughout the week. For example, at weekends, it's more likely to be agency staff or private providers, overnights, etc. What we find is that it depends on the person. Some people will prefer different people to look after different needs. Some people would prefer consistent carers all the time. That's probably something that is more common. But there's a range of preferences there. But we would say consistency in carers is really important, and really important to the older people and to the families and other people involved in that care as well, to know the people who are coming in and out to the home and the family member.
We might send you in a note on that. We've done a bit of work from our research and evaluation, because obviously that's a desire of people to get to know, have consistency in that. And other countries have done some work on that. I just don't have it in front of me, but we might send a note in afterwards of what other countries may have done about that to try and alleviate that. And just to answer your question on fundraising, I suppose we're an NGO, so we fundraise. The purpose of which is that you can see from our reports, we meet emerging needs. We operate in the gaps in the system, usually whether it's around loneliness or other things. So we fill the gaps until laws, statutories get to that. So ultimately that's why it's there. We use that to invest in innovations and in change, whether it's the use of technology for older people, whether it's the volunteer programs, all of those types of things. It's to make sure that we have the ability to respond as we see the changing needs, while then working with all the government departments and working with all our partners in the NGOs to try and fill the gaps or create models of services that can be rolled out nationally to make sure that those gaps get closed over time.
Thank you very much.